So ani and dinaway magani dog niji gakina nitsa biji kins indijana paz wabasheshi and orda mushkazibin and dunjaba. Numiguchi on anik and gu a kinago gino a gapi jaigoma sonongo. Eminoa dashtago ingi peminigu ano sema the gagigido on the bikanga emade wabu asia winid miguchi was it akina was it chigeano ma. You know, dashigo new jaganashi imaginates. So, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. I just want to acknowledge everybody out there in the crowd in our beautiful language, our beautiful descriptive Ojibwe language. I just acknowledged everybody and also said that, man, I wish I had some food. I see you guys are eating some delicious food out there. No, I'm just kidding. But very blessed and honored to be asked to say a little bit on behalf of Nibi Kong or Mede Wabu, or what we call water Nibi. Water is life to all of us, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. And my name is Bija Keents. That's my given name, or Dylan Jennings. And like our relative talked about, I come from the Bad River Band of Ojibwe, and I asked for forgiveness. I was asked to be down there, and most recently a relative in one of our neighboring communities passed away, and so when that happens, we, in our ceremonial way, we have to be there for them and be there for the family. And I couldn't help but think about water in general, and I think about this every day. But I couldn't help but think about water in this context as I sat there at that ceremony last night. In our Matigwakik, our water drum that we use in our ceremonies, was there, and it was singing these songs for our relative as he goes on his journey. And I look over and I see tears from the family members, and I look at how blessed and how much water it truly does for us as Anishinaabe, as people in general, as human beings, as it consoles us, as it's able to give life, right? We hear that oftentimes, water is life, and that's the absolute truth. And so, I was asked to talk a little bit about that perspective from our point of view. When we talk about water, we always talk about all the different things that it does for us. And in our way of life, we go back to our original teachings that talk about Anishinaabe and Nakonigewan, which is our traditional law, or our spirit law, our way of life that we follow. And within that context, that spirit law, those are the first treaties that we entered into, was with everything in creation, right? We have agreements with the Wawashkeshia, we have agreements with the deer, with the beings in the water, we have agreements with everything in creation. And in those agreements, it's a relationship that's forged, a relationship of reciprocity, right? Where we as Anishinaabe people, we're gonna take care of these things, but they are gonna take care of us too. And so we have those agreements that are in place. And that's a really important thing to understand, is those agreements we don't take lightly. And nowadays you'll see a lot of indigenous communities starting to stand up and put that into, the more Western format in within constitutions, and with recognizing the rights of nature. You'll see that all over nowadays, because we're starting to acknowledge those things on a different level, to justify it, to protect everything that's important to us. And so those original agreements that we have with everything in creation, including the water, are what we follow in our lives as Anishinaabe, and many indigenous communities do. And so I wanted to start off by acknowledging that, and and talk about that, because as our lives are concerned, our people have always lived a really semi-nomadic, cyclical lifestyle, where we're always traveling and moving to our various harvesting grounds, and water plays a huge role in that. Water is the way that we navigate through our lives. Water is how we're born into this world. That water in our mother's womb, each and every one of you were born in that way, unless, of course, some of you were just placed on this earth out of nowhere. Water is how you were put here. And so water is the way that we navigate around and practice our harvesting ways of life. And everything is so central and integral and focused around Nibi, or water. And so we wanted to, to express that on behalf of our community. We wanted to ingrain that in everybody's minds, because the things that we know to be true, science is now just catching up to it, right? We understand the cycles of water. We understand the nature component, and we've done that because of, we know these things because of observation and the time that we've spent observing our environment. And nowadays, we might call that phenology, but we've always had that knowledge, that traditional ecological knowledge, and understanding these things. And so I wanted to first off just say that much and acknowledge that, and get into a little further in depth in our way of life. The women are the carriers of water. They're the ones. And so in the language, I ask forgiveness for speaking on behalf of this, on behalf of water, on behalf of my community. We have a lot of really strong women up here in our community that are water carriers, and they're responsible for that. And we say that because women carry water, they are the keepers of life. They are the ones that carry life with them. They take care of our young ones and nurture them. And so it's all interrelated with water when you think about it. And so, we wanted to acknowledge all of our women, all of our women throughout the world, for that role that they play, whether they realize that or not, as carriers of that water. And that's part of our teachings. We always have that reverence for our Kwewag, our women in our communities. And you'll see that too around Indian country. A lot of people starting to do, or continuing to do, water walks and acknowledging the water, acknowledging these places and these certain bodies of water that have different teachings about them. And so, I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and to petition people to think about how tribal sovereignty and how tribal treaty rights affect you. And I ask this to a lot of groups of people as well, but to different presentations that I do, but to really give that some thought, as at the turn of the century and over 30 years ago, there was a lot of backlash. A lot of you probably remember when treaty rights were reaffirmed, and the tribe's right to harvest fish, to harvest on the inland lakes, and to harvest on the big lake, and to hunt, and to exercise their treaty rights that they've always had, and exercise that cultural and ceremonial component to their way of life. When that was reaffirmed, there was a lot of backlash. And I really petition people to think about how treaty rights and how tribal sovereignty has somehow affected you in some way, shape, or form. When I asked that question at a group a couple weeks ago, and I gave this talk over in Red Cliff, somebody actually thought about it for a second and said, you know what? Because the tribes are here, because many of the tribes are staunch advocates for water, in many of these areas, the tribes are protecting that water, not just for themselves, but for everybody. So utilizing treaty rights and tribal sovereignty as a mechanism to protect water for everybody is at the core of what we do as tribal communities. Utilizing our abilities to do those things is really a really important aspect to who we are, and a testament to what we do as Indigenous people, as communities, as leaders. And that's a really important thing to remember, that everything that we do and the way that we utilize our sovereignty and our ability to protect the natural environment, to protect the water, to protect the rivers, the streams, all around the country, all around the world. We don't do that just for ourselves. We do that for everybody, because I'm sure every single one of you in this room drinks water. And so I wanted to say that and to acknowledge that, because that's a very important component to how we are taught to lead our people, how we are taught to teach the next generations to come, to plan for future generations. That seventh generation mentality is still very ingrained in our way of life, where we're taught that we might just be a raindrop in the timeline, in the river of a timeline, in the river of history, right? But if we contributed in a way that helped our people 7 generations into the future in some way, shape, or form, whether that be by clean water, whether that be by clean resources, then we've done our job. We've done our job as human beings, as stewards of this place that we call home. And so, I wanted to acknowledge that, to kind of empower everybody here, but to have you guys go out and do some of that legwork and empower others across the nation, because we need to start. Now's the time to start empowering all of our people to stand up to be water protectors, to take care of water, because water is life. Water is everything that we need to be who we are. And I hope that someday, I sit down with a lot of our elders in our community, and a lot of times one of our elders, Mr. Joe Rose, some of you may know him. I spend a lot of time with that guy, and he always talks about being able to go around this community when he was a young man and go to any lake or any stream and scoop water out and drink it straight from that stream. And he was sitting there one day, and I swear I saw, this twinkle in his eyes, and he got really quiet, and he said, I wonder if Anishinaabe, if we'll ever get back to that point where we can do that again. So I wonder if we will ever be able to do that in our lives, or if my great grandchildren will be able to do that again, to drink that water straight from the streams that it flows from. And so I think about that, and I think as we move forward in life, that should be part of our goal, to make sure not only to protect the water, but to make sure that our lakes, rivers, streams are all safeguarded and prioritized, and that the ecosystems that are flourishing in some of those water bodies and tributaries are allowed to do what they need to do to heal themselves. So good.